We're also joined, just very briefly, former MHK, former Minister Phil Gawne, who I've persuaded to carry on for a bit for us. Your reflections on developments this week, is there reason to feel enthused by some of the debate, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the fortunate position now of not having to toe any sort of government lines or any of that sort of stuff. But I do understand why government always works a lot slower than perhaps most people would like, including many ministers. Inevitably, government works at the speed of the lowest common denominator. It's almost inevitable anyway that's how it happens, particularly in our consensus style of government. If you don't have a party system with people with a clear message and a clear mandate from the public, it's hard to gather enough support to make strong and bold statements. But the positive is that the Chief Minister did recognise that this was a climate emergency. Whether he did that of his own free volition, or whether he was pushed or cajoled, as suggested by the Treasury Minister, is only for the Council of Ministers to know. But it's great that the whole of Tynwald have supported that something should happen. The fear I have, both as a sort of an activist and someone who cares very passionately about this, and as former minister responsible for these sorts of policies, is that the speed with which we're talking about, 2050, by 2050, what will I be in 2050? I will, if I'm still alive, I'll be
older.
I'll be 85. And by that, that feels like a long way away. Will I, by that time, if perhaps the big push happens in the last few years, which is often the case with very, very lengthy deadlines, it'll be far too late to be making changes by then. Added to which, if you set yourself a 5 or 10 year program to convert all the properties on the Isle of Man to either zero carbon or very, very low carbon, that is achievable, and it's achievable in 5 or 10 years' time if you're prepared to put your money where your mouth is. Something like £50 million a year leaves the island to go to its sort of source, which is the fossil fuel production centres, whether that be in Europe, Russia, or the Middle East. That money leaves our economy forever. Every year, £50 million in that sort of region, just to heat our homes, which are leaking the heat back into the environment. Now, whether you're a Stu Peters total cynic in relation to climate change or not, whether you're like me and passionately believe that we need to do something, there's a basic bit of economics here. What on earth are we doing? Wasting £50 million worth of money that could be being spent in the Manx economy. If government invested £50 million to convert all the homes, or to encourage people to convert all their homes on the island, if they invested that 50 million now over a 5-year period, told people over this 5-year period, this is the last of the money. If you do it in 5 years, you'll get a really good bit of support to make these changes, and thereafter you will, if not halve, you probably more than significantly halve your heating bills. Even if we only manage to save 25 million of that money that leaves the island every year, £25 million extra being spent in the Manx economy. Over a course of 10 years, Isle of Man government would very quickly recoup its 50 million investment, and thereafter we're all making savings and spending the money on other things in the Manx economy. It just makes loads of economic sense, both for the Manx government and individually for homeowners. Why would you want to spend money heating the outside of your house? Because effectively a lot of energy in some of the poorly insulated homes just goes straight out the windows, straight out through the roof or through the walls. Why not get them insulated? I can't for the life of me understand why we're not doing that.
And just whilst we've got you, Mr. Gawne, if I was to don my cynical hat a bit, by 2035 or even by 2050, lots of the incumbent politicians, I would guess anyway, won't be in office any longer. Is there a reason to believe or a reason to feel Tynwald sort of booting this issue into the long grass?
I don't think that's necessarily the reason why that 2050 date is being chosen. 2050 is a convenient date because that's what the UK did, so people will probably think, well, that's an easy one to go with. Also, it's the date that we chose in the last Council of Ministers. Now, it's fair to say that I would have, at that stage, preferred a much more ambitious date, but as I say, you have to go along with your colleagues, and certainly there were a few fairly prominent figures in the last government who were very cynical about the whole need to do anything. And as I say, whether you're a cynic about climate change, whether you believe it's some made-up thing by the UN and all the world's scientists, or not, there's just some basic sound economics here. I mean, basically, the fuel use on the island can be split into three. Heating space for homes and workplaces is 1/3. Another third is transport, and another third is electricity production. Roughly, I mean, it's not quite that, and presumably things have changed a bit since I've been out of politics. But in terms of transport, what we desperately need is more people to be using more electricity so that we can make the MUA model work a bit better to sort of pay off the massive debt that was incurred, I must say, before I was a minister. In fact, before I was an MHK. So an obvious thing to do would be to encourage significant conversion to electric vehicles and electric heating sources through ground and air source heat pumps. Again, this is something that makes economic sense for the Isle of Man to do. Invest in a fairly short period of time, again giving people a fairly clear steer that this is going to happen over the next 5 or 10 years, and if you're not on board at that time, you're not going to get any support at a later time to make this change. If we did that, if we converted half the transport on the island to electric vehicles, that would have a massive impact, a massive improving impact at the MUA. Everyone's electricity prices could potentially reduce as a result. Really good news for the Manx economy, for Manx government, for the MUA, for the population generally, and as a byproduct, we're not polluting the environment quite as much, even if we continued using gas, because the combustion engine rate of conversion, I'm told, was something like 20 or 30%, whereas using electricity, even having the transmission through the electricity lines to charge up your car, it means that you're producing far less fossil fuels by driving an electric vehicle powered by gas. Now, if we could then, of course, the final third, the final part that needs to be resolved is the electricity generation, and I understand that we're in contracts up to, is it 2032, sometime like that? After which we could potentially move to renewable energy sources. So I do understand that bit of the equation is not something we can easily change at this stage. But the other two, it just makes loads of economic sense. It's an obvious thing to do. It needs money, it needs some investment from government, and it probably needs big investment. But then there's a massive return as well as a result of that. So, yeah.